The French Revolution. In 1789, France was an absolute monarchy facing deep political and financial crisis while common people were starving because of skyrocketing bread prices. The tension broke on July 14th in Paris. Rumors spread that the king was going to crush the growing political unrest with his army. In response, a Parisian crowd decided to arm themselves and marched toward the Bastille, a medieval fortress used as a state prison and an armory. Before the violence, delegates had already presented the king with thousands of cahiers de doléances, or lists of grievances, demonstrating a deep nationwide unhappiness. However, the royal court at Versailles remained detached and unwilling to make meaningful tax or political reforms. For many, the Bastille, though housing only a handful of prisoners, symbolized the king's arbitrary power and the oppressive nature of royal justice. The head of the prison governor was paraded on a pike, marking a terrifying new level of violence in the nation's political life. The new National Assembly used the energy from this popular protest to finally declare their authority over the monarchy. The storming of the Bastille became the spark that set the countryside ablaze, leading to the end of the French monarchy and setting off a chain of bloody events that transformed European political thought forever.
The Chinese Revolution. For centuries, China was ruled by emperors, but by 1911, the Qing dynasty was seen as weak and ineffective. The single event that brought the system crashing down was less a protest and more a sudden accident. In the city of Wuchang, a bomb accidentally went off in the apartment of a revolutionary group, alerting police to their existence. The cell feared being arrested and in a sudden desperate act launched the Wuchang Uprising on October 10th. The Qing dynasty was already deeply weakened by foreign interference, internal corruption, and popular unrest against its ineffective reforms. The revolutionaries were so panicked by the bomb explosion that they forced their own commanders to lead the sudden unplanned military action to avoid immediate execution. The revolt's key advantage was the loyalty of the local army regiment, which quickly joined the revolutionary cause, providing necessary military strength. Within weeks, 15 of China's 18 provinces declared their independence, with little to no resistance from the central government. The unexpected military revolt succeeded and quickly inspired other provinces to declare independence from the central government. The single, accidental uprising led to the rapid collapse of the Qing dynasty, ending over 2,000 years of imperial rule in China and establishing the Republic of China.
The German Revolution. Germany was on the verge of defeat in World War I, but the old imperial government, led by Kaiser Wilhelm II, was refusing to surrender. In late October 1918, the German Naval Command ordered a final, futile attack against the British fleet. The sailors in the port city of Kiel, knowing the war was already lost, decided they would not die for a hopeless cause. They started a mass mutiny, refusing to follow the order. The sailors saw the planned naval battle as a pointless suicide mission designed only to save the honor of the officer corps, not the German people. When the sailors began to be arrested, their comrades responded by freeing them and taking control of the entire port. The revolutionary fervor spread through Germany's major cities via rail, carried by returning mutinous soldiers and sailors. Local military and civil authorities found themselves powerless against the sudden, massive collapse of order and popular revolt. The Kaiser fled to the Netherlands, making no attempt to defend the dynasty that had ruled Germany for centuries. This single act of defiance by the sailors quickly spread to land forces and workers in nearby cities. Councils of workers and soldiers formed, demanding peace and a new government. The protest movement grew so fast that within 2 weeks, the Kaiser was forced to abdicate. The Kiel Mutiny was the decisive event that ended the German Empire and ushered in the Weimar Republic.
The American Revolution. By the 1770s, many American colonists were deeply frustrated by what they saw as unfair taxes and policies imposed by the British Parliament, where they had no direct representation. The frustration came to a head in 1773 over a tax on tea. That December, a group of colonists, disguised as Mohawk Indians, boarded 3 British ships in Boston Harbor. Their act of protest was targeted and specific. They dumped 342 chests of tea into the water, a massive financial loss. Colonists felt that the British Parliament had no right to levy taxes on them without their direct consent in what they called taxation without representation. The destruction of the East India Company's tea was a bold and direct attack on British commercial power, which infuriated leaders in London. George Washington himself later called the destruction of private property an outrage, but the political consequences were unavoidable. Parliament hoped their severe punitive measures would isolate Massachusetts and intimidate the other colonies into submission. Instead, the unified resistance to the acts proved that the colonies were now willing to coordinate their actions against the crown. This was not a general uprising, but a precise act of civil disobedience known as the Boston Tea Party.
Britain responded with the Intolerable Acts, which closed the Boston port and cracked down on colonial self-governance. Instead of crushing the resistance, this harsh reaction united the colonies, directly leading to the formation of the Continental Congress, the outbreak of the War for Independence, and the creation of the United States.
The Russian Revolution. In 1917, Russia was still fighting in World War I, and a combination of military failure and extreme poverty had pushed the country to a breaking point. On February 23rd, women factory workers in the capital city of Petrograd decided they had had enough. It was International Women's Day, but their protest wasn't about rights, it was about bread shortages. Thousands of women took to the streets, demanding food and an end to the war. The Tsar, Nicholas II, was away commanding the army, completely misjudging the threat posed by the civilian unrest. The imperial capital had run out of food and fuel, making the conditions unlivable for the working class. The troops that were supposed to fire on the crowds instead broke ranks and handed their rifles to the workers. This complete loss of authority happened in a matter of days, stunning both Russian and international observers. The political vacuum created by the protest and the abdication was quickly filled by radical elements, irrevocably changing the country's future. This single protest quickly led to strikes by men, which then turned into mass demonstrations and violent clashes with the police. The military units sent to stop the crowds started to defect and join the protesters instead. Within days, Tsar Nicholas II, the absolute ruler of Russia, was forced to abdicate. What started as a hunger protest by women workers became the spark that toppled a centuries-old monarchy and led, eventually, to the creation of the Soviet Union.
The 1905 Russian Revolution. Russia's Tsar Nicholas II ruled with absolute power, but the country was suffering from social unrest and a humiliating military defeat against Japan. On Sunday, January 22, 1905, thousands of peaceful, unarmed workers marched to the Tsar's Winter Palace in St. Petersburg to present him with a petition for better working conditions and political reform. The Imperial Guard, without warning, opened fire on the protesters, killing and wounding hundreds. The petition carried by the workers was addressed directly to the Tsar, pleading with him as their little father for relief from their impossible poverty. They were led by a priest named Father Gapone, who believed the Tsar was unaware of the people's suffering and would help them if only he knew. The guards opened fire as the protesters approached the gates, turning a loyal demonstration into a national tragedy and a propaganda disaster. The ensuing unrest saw a famous mutiny on the battleship Potemkin and a general strike that paralyzed the entire Russian Empire. Though the Tsar later reneged on most of his promises, the day permanently crippled the public's perception of his sacred authority. This day, known as Bloody Sunday, destroyed the people's faith in the Tsar as their protector. That one massacre triggered a wave of furious mass strikes, peasant uprisings, and military mutinies across the country. While the Tsar managed to stay in power, the event forced him to grant a limited parliament, establishing the first real, if temporary, political challenge to the Russian autocracy.
The Arab Spring. For decades, large parts of the Middle East were ruled by seemingly unshakable dictators, but the entire region was a tinderbox of high unemployment, poverty, and repression. The spark that lit the fire came in Tunisia in 2010. Mohamed Bouazizi, a 26-year-old street vendor, had his fruit and vegetable cart and his electronic scales confiscated by a police officer. When his attempts to appeal to local officials failed, Bouazizi walked to the local government building and in a single desperate act of protest set himself on fire. The female officer who confiscated his cart had also publicly slapped and humiliated him, adding personal insult to economic injury. Bouazizi's act resonated with millions of disenfranchised youth who felt they had no economic future under the old regimes. News of his protest spread rapidly through early social media, bypassing state-controlled media entirely and inspiring similar actions. Bouazizi died in the hospital a few weeks later, turning him into a martyr for the entire Arab world. His sacrifice became the final, powerful image that ignited the widespread popular uprisings in neighboring nations. His self-immolation led to local riots, and when a video of his mother protesting the act went viral, the protests spread across the country. Within a month, the long-standing dictator of Tunisia, Zine El Abidine Ben Ali, was forced to flee the country. The success of that single protest triggered a chain reaction of similar movements in Egypt, Libya, Syria, and Yemen, causing civil wars and regime change and destabilizing the entire region.